You're listening to NT Paranormal After Dark. Nothing normal about it.
Hey everybody, we're back after some technical difficulties. So today we are talking about those dirty, dirty devil worshippers from the 70s and 80s that brought the rise of Satanic Panic. And I think it's going to be a good episode because we've got Allie, Casey, and Sarah all here. So we've got some different points of view on Satanic Panic today, which I think is pretty cool. And like what I was saying before is, you know, you went to school for like the criminology part of it. She went to school for psychology, and then she's just seen some shit. Well, she's from Cleburne, so she's in like one of the towns that's like blamed for having a whole bunch of Satanists in it, you know. But
because Cleburne is on a hellmouth.
Yeah, believe it or not, I actually did a bunch of research on it today, and like I kind of educated myself a little bit on it too. Kind of, I was kind of surprised at like what I kind of narrowed down had started it, but I think you guys all had some like major talking points that you guys wanted to hit on. But just I guess for the audience, when we're talking about Satanic Panic, what are we talking about?
What we're talking about, like the core of the Satanic Panic, quote unquote, is satanic ritual abuse, specifically ritual satanic sexual abuse of minors or children.
Right, but mainly what we're talking about is what happened in the 70s, 80s, late.
It was mostly 80s and very early 90s.
Yeah,
yeah.
That was like that's the height.
The roots are in the 70s, but no one had coined that term till halfway through the 80s.
Right.
Yeah, as it was dying down, you know, you don't get a name for an era till the era is over with, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I was looking at the roots of it, and I kind of traced it back to like three things, which started as early as like '69, when it really got prevalent, or what got it like in the pulse, because this is mainly an American thing. This isn't like a worldwide thing. This is something that happened here in America mostly.
It did end up spreading worldwide into you know England, Europe. Well, I guess England is part of Europe, but you know, geography is hard. But I mean, it started spreading globally in the mid to late 90s. But it is uniquely American, yes.
From what I saw about it is in what I gathered, what started it, at least getting it in the minds of people, is you had a few things going on in between 69 and 65 in 75, and that was serial killings. Like they started being more prevalent as serial killings because the FBI had just started their looking into it and classifying them and trying to get into their heads or whatever. And when you start, and you might have some commentary on this, but when you start any new field like that, or what, you know, you're making mistakes along the way. We make a lot of like kind of is you're trying to like progress and learn more things. You make some mistakes. Like science is the same way too. But the big thing I saw that kicked it off was in '69 was the Manson killings. Yes. And even though it wasn't like, it's not directly like Satan worship related or devil worship related, it was an occult. Well, I think it was the first time that there was like a big like cult killing where like a guy told a bunch of people to like go do, and it was weird. I mean,
but do you really even consider him a cult other than just, you know, some old kook on LSD with some other kooks on LSD?
But you have to think of it from the terms that people were seeing it in '69. Like we know that now because we've had the benefit of tons of books and documentaries and things like in a different perspective on it nowadays. Back then, they just saw it as the Manson family killing.
I mean, suicide cults were on the rise too. That was
right. You had the Jonestown thing.
Well, Jonestown wasn't exactly a suicide cult. It just ended in suicide.
It quickly became a suicide
cult.
Cults,
it ended in
cults
suicide.
In general were on the rise.
And I know you guys wanted to touch on this, but the other thing that happened in '69 is Anton LaVey published the Satanic Bible, which to me is just totally derivative of Ayn Rand. Like a lot of it's plagiarized. What he put down in the Satanic Church was founded in '66, and then they adopted that as like their official literature, which is funny because it's almost the way it's written and the way it's like plagiarized and pulled from different philosophies and stuff. It's not like its own thing, and so people that haven't read it or don't know a lot about it, they have a different idea what it is. They think it's like the opposite of the Christian Bible, and really it's just this like book of dogma or whatever. But that was a big thing because you could buy it like on bookshelves, and that I think that scared a lot of people.
I want to get it real clear though that Satanism is an atheistic society.
Yeah.
There's a difference between atheist and devil worshiper.
Right.
I mean, Satanist and devil
And there's
worshiper.
also there's also a
huge
difference.
difference.
And if you put two devil worshippers side by side, they'll probably tell you there's a big difference between somebody that worships the devil and some 16-year-old that just likes killing cats in the cemetery or
But
whatever.
I just want to get it straight that I'm not. We're not calling Satanism anti-Christian or whatever. It's just it's not even a religion.
Yeah, it's
It's a club, basically.
yeah, they get
set of
together.
guidelines.
They,
Yeah, like Casey said.
they have a fellowship. I mean, they just.
And the third thing I wanted to bring, and the reason I'm like just jumping on the three things that started it is because I think it's a good beginning, and really it's the only thing I have to contribute to this whole conversation. But the third thing I think is really important is in 1972, and this is a big deal because we get in a lot of arguments with a lot of the other paranormal groups about Ouija boards, and whether or not they're occult and things like that.
Oh, The Exorcist.
1972, William Peter Blatty published The Exorcist. And the thing is, and a lot of people don't realize it because, they're like, oh, Ouija boards, they're tied to the devil and all that.
They never were.
1972, when William Peter Blatty published The Exorcist, that was the very first time the Ouija boards were connected to the occult in any way. Before that, it was just a parlor game. It had nothing to do with the dead or anything like that. But then that book hit and everybody read it, and suddenly you could get possessed because it was the dead controlling a Ouija board. And that is the genesis of that thought process, that the occult could lead you down this path, that like different devices could lead you to possession.
I mean, the early Ouija board, I can assume would be much akin to the Magic 8 Ball. Like, I mean,
that's exactly what it was, and it's made by the same manufacturer too. But I think that's really important because the other thing that book did was it brought exorcism and rites of exorcism into the light. And I think he did something really intelligent when he made that book. He wrote it under the guise or under the suggestion that
it was based on
a true story.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
where
people
that
paid
whole
attention.
Nonsense came from.
And I think those three things are kind of really what snowballed the thought process that it was the little grain that started the whole snowball that ended up being Satanic Panic. Three completely unrelated things. And I mean, you can throw like Rosemary's Baby in there too, which I think kind of came after it had snowballed a little bit too. I'm not sure exactly when that came out.
Yeah, and it becomes like a perfect storm when you have all of these things, and then you throw in Christian fundamentalism, and then you throw in police officers who want to get ahead, and then you throw off they just all build off of each other, and that's how you end up with
Okay,
a
so
lot of...
explain the difference between Satanism, devil worship, all that. Let's clear the air on that first.
I don't know anything about devil worship. I'm not sure that's actually even a thing.
It's not.
But Satanism is, like Carlos just said, it's somewhat of a life philosophy, at least with the LaVeyan Satanism, from what he can remember from high
Like
school,
Buddhism.
the Exorcist rule. Yeah. What I know about them is it's an ego-driven book of philosophy. So it's everything that's why it's considered Satanism. It's very anti-Christian. In the sense that you put yourself first, because
it's not selflessness.
It states that you can't help others until you help yourself.
Yeah. It's like going back to Buddhism. It's almost anti-Buddhism as opposed to anti-Christian.
Except it has it's really interesting to me that some of the stuff that was in this philosophy has actually turned out to be true. That, you have to help yourself before you help others.
Yeah,
you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
Self-care is important. Do what thou will and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of those things that's really badly named because since
they're trolls,
especially here in the United States, I think it's safe to say that the greater majority of people, if they are of any religion, are probably Christian, whatever. And so it's the Satan part of Satanism, just the word being in there makes you think evil.
That's
without
by
getting past the
design.
cover.
I believe this was the origin of trolls.
Yeah, because I was about to say it's by design.
They were trolling.
Yeah. It's, so it's just, yeah, what she said, they are just a bunch of trolls.
So one thing I can point out, the difference between Satanism and devil worship that I do know, that's the difference between like LaVey, what you guys are talking about, where it's self-care, self-help, putting yourself above others, things like that. Devil worship is more like actually worshiping the mythical figure of Satan and trying to perform like ritual acts. And that's more what Aleister Crowley and his group of people were into, which they were trying to summon demons and stuff like that. And
very H.P. Lovecraft of them.
That's
Yes.
it's exactly what it was. And I think that was part of their mythology. Like they were trying to like raise the old gods and practice black magic and go back to like, well, I mean, you laugh, but during that time period, it was very prevalent that they thought that they could do those things.
Yeah.
I just don't think devil worship is like a big. Everybody acts like this is something that happens all the time. It's really not.
Well, and that's the thing. I think it gets confused with Satanism and all that. Especially like from what I read in the 70s and the 80s and stuff, law enforcement was a big problem with that because they got these like PSAs out when they were doing like their training and stuff, and they're like, oh, there's a dead cat, it must be Satanist. Oh, an old lady got hit during a robbery, it must be a Satanist. Like
They're drinking all the marijuanas
some a-hole drew a pentagram, they must be Satanists. And it's like
I think
really it's just smart ass kids.
I think the basic root of it is us and them, as always.
Yes.
Us versus it's in groups and out groups. I mean,
As a society, we always need a them. There's always going to be a them. It's sad, but because eventually you learn, the them that we were fighting against all along were not that bad.
yeah, but in the 80s, the them were the Satanists.
Yes.
yeah, and there's still parts of it that are still prevalent today because like it especially relates to us because I can't name a single ghost hunter show I've seen where there's like, if they go to Alton Bridge, they're like, Satanists still come out here and sacrifice things. Or somebody drew a pentagram down here. Do you think they might have summoned a demon?
It gives me so much rage. I'm like,
I know.
Can you at least Google Satanism, please?
Well, I mean, okay, so the terminology is wrong, but there are people that I'm not saying it's huge, widespread, like right? But there are people that do go out and try to do rituals and do things like that. It's not like it's never, ever happened before. Like it's just this complete urban legend. People go out and draw a pentagram and they try to raise the goat man. And it's kind of dumb.
99% urban legend.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the only like religions that I know still practice sacrifice are, what is it, Santeria and Voodoo?
I don't know. Do you count the holy sacrament of the, Lord's Supper?
Well, I mean, I don't because we're not like sacrificing real beings anymore.
Yeah, Christianity is a blood religion.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, Catholics literally think it turns into the blood of Jesus, don't they? Isn't that their...
I don't know. Ask a Catholic.
I don't know. We didn't want to make it a religious debate. We wanted to talk about the actual time period though, and kind of what happened with the hysteria side of it.
Yeah.
I wanted you guys to kind of like clarify, like we do know
the difference.
The difference. Like if you're tuning in, don't be like, well, I'm a Satanist and you guys are. No, it's not that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how they thought from 1969 to 1990, and some idiots still think today, because it's one of those things. It was just like real clever scapegoat, and all it was is the Salem witch trials, basically just closer to us, closer to home, and this was all happening when we were kids. So what was the first things that were, because most of this happened in the 80s, what were the first things that came to mind that you guys thought about? For
the first one I remembered was the McMartin preschool, because it's one of my first memories.
See, yeah, because the McMartin preschool thing, I wasn't exactly alive. I mean, I was alive during the trial eventually, but...
Because it happened the year before I was born, but I remember the latter part of the trial.
Yeah, because I believe it all came to a head in 1989, and
There was 2 trials. I don't remember when the last one was.
So
the last one was in 1989.
Okay, so I only know what you guys are talking about, really, because I read a brief paragraph about it today. So I'm sure there's people that are watching or listening that don't know what you're talking. But this is a real significant one, and this was the thing that really got the ball rolling in the 80s. So tell us about the case or what happened allegedly.
Okay, so I've got a little bit of notes on it. So the McMartin preschool was run by the McMartin family. I think it was like 5 members of the family. I didn't write down all their names, but
7, I think.
Okay, yeah, probably.
And the 2 that because eventually they let go 5 of them, and 2 stayed on trial, and that
Right.
was Peggy and
her son.
her son. Yeah, the dude. I don't remember his name, but he was the only male that was.
Yeah.
And the rest were female, which was super weird.
Yeah. And so in 1983, a mother came forward to the police because she claimed that her son had been sodomized.
She said he was having trouble sleeping and sitting down.
Yeah,
and he was 2.5.
Yes. And so she, went to the police, like, my son's been sodomized and this, that, and the other. And then, so apparently, like, from what I understand, the boy had some trouble passing his bowels. He was having trouble pooping. And so apparently that's when the abuse began. Apparently that's what culminated the abuse. One of the teachers did some inappropriate things with him to get it out, essentially. And it snowballed into, later on, everyone was accused. I believe the final count, by 1984, there were 360 people who were claiming to have been abused.
Over 5 daycares.
And over 5 daycares.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and it's a mass hysteria sort of deal because, the thing I saw is, most of, I think all the allegations turned out to be false because,
Yes.
like, out of 26 convictions, I think 20 of them have been completely overturned by now.
So what happened was this first kid's mom was nuts.
Yeah,
She was
She was mental. She had a history of
psychotic.
mental illness.
And she started accusing everyone of molesting her son, including his dad and other people. And these other kids were given leading interviews. They led them, and they basically wouldn't let them leave until they said they'd been molested. They started throwing in satanic abuse.
Yeah, I have a list of everything that they were. I have a list of everything that they were. Like, it was just nuts. So, of course, the abuse began after the painful bowel movements.
Pull your mic down. You look really uncomfortable talking like that.
Okay, so yeah. So the mother also accused them of bestiality, of I can't read my own handwriting.
I can't believe you wrote all that stuff down. What if somebody finds your notebook, like at McDonald's? Like,
Drilling a child under the arms, like drilling holes under their arms. And said that the accused man who she first accused of molesting her son could fly.
Oh yeah, he levitated.
He levitated. They were so some of the suggestions that were brought up, they were flying witches. They were taken up in hot air balloons and molested in hot air balloons. They were molested in underground tunnels. One kid identified Chuck Norris as a perpetrator.
Oh yeah, he not only identified Chuck Norris, but a local politician as the perpetrators. He circled them.
There was claims of orgies in the daycares, and then children being flushed down the toilet.
They also said they put them in a plane with no windows and flew them to Palm Springs. They said they took them to the car wash and molested them in the car. They said they went to a church and saw people in black robes. They said there was a man dressed like a goat. They said they murdered little babies and made them eat their hearts. They said they cut the ears off bunnies.
In other words, there were a lot of claims and a lot of coaching going on here, and there was no physical evidence.
All of them were absolutely false. Not a single child was abused.
A lot of these,
a lot of these children,
I believe it was the Children's Institute Children's Institute International.
Yeah, CII.
Of Los Angeles.
So, in your opinion, why was it so easy to get those convictions then? I mean,
They didn't convict him.
They were
went
eventually
free.
they were acquitted like 5 years later.
He spent 5 years in jail with no bail. It's like the most expensive trial we've ever had
Yeah.
in the U.S.
Yeah, in California.
I mean,
It was in California.
I know, but
I know, but
it was the most
the most
expensive one in the
expensive-
U.S.
Yeah, because I believe they were on $1 million bond, and they
main-
couldn't make the bond.
Well, and the main guy didn't get bond. Him and his mom, the two that remained in the trial,
Yeah,
that weren't let go, they didn't get bond
right.
bail,
So
which was a big deal. They got refused bail for 5 years. That guy sat in prison.
yeah,
Without
he's lucky
being-
I'm like he's lucky he survived.
They put him. They didn't put him in gin pop because
Okay.
they were going to kill him. They don't take kindly to child molesters in jail. But
So this person who was innocent of any wrongdoing could have been murdered
Mm-hmm.
in jail because of someone's imagination.
But I think what happened is people want to believe kids.
Absolutely. I mean, you always want to believe a child when someone says that somebody's hurting them.
And I think that sort of psychology was in its infancy.
Yes.
They had not done a lot to focus on child molestation before that. People didn't think it was a thing, or it was just a thing that happened. Ignore it.
And you just kind of sweep it under the rug.
But I really think it was easy to believe because it's this one family. They've got no way to fight this. Really, they're well off enough to have a daycare, but they're not rich.
Yeah.
And all these kids are just saying this crazy stuff. And it was in the middle of Satanic Panic, so everyone was going, Satanists!
I think what's really important to kind of bring up is, like, I think one of the reasons that we even had Satanic Panic and had things like that is because at the time, because of what we were going, I mean, we were in the middle of the Cold War. We had a lot of things going on economically, the war on drugs, things like that. I think as a people, we needed a scapegoat. You know, the us and them thing. We needed somebody to blame these things on, and it was very, very convenient to blame all the bad things that were happening
On Satan.
It was also the rise of the Christian moral majority.
right. And you know, the thing about that, a lot of the information that the police were using, like I watched some of the like video, like the PSA things that like the police watched about Satanism and things like that. A lot of that information came from 4 specific people that like really drove this thing.
Well, I mean, and also so many people, like, they owe their rise to the Satanic Panic, on exploiting the Satanic
Right,
Panic.
yeah, and that's John Todd, Mike Warnke, Herschel Smith, and David Hansen, not the local David Hansen from the news, just to clarify. But
That's Dale Hansen, just by the way. Not David.
okay, Dale Hansen is a Satanist. No, but these were all people that came out and said that they were raised in occult, devil worshipping households, that they had escaped and become Christians, and they appealed to that like evangelical group about like, oh, we overcame
To the Jerry Falwell
and,
types.
and they made up all these things. They're like, oh yeah, they did this like ritualistic abuse when we were kids. We helped murder people. We did sacrifices. We tried to raise they came up with all these like fantastic stories, and then here it is like 30 years, like within 20 years, it was all like shown to all be false allegations anyway. But here it is 30 years later, we're still looking at it, and we know all these claims that these people made were 100% false, but we still use that information today as our analysis of how devil worshippers operate, because we see things like Ramirez, who was just like out of his mind and did everything for Satan or whatever.
Yeah, he very famously, there's that photo of him holding his hand up in court, and he has the pentagram.
Right, yeah, and he used to hang out in the cemetery, and he did like the things that they were afraid of, that they were spreading all this panic about. He did those things. He's like the one guy. But that's like their poster child for watch out for this. This is happening without you knowing it in your town, in Cleburne.
This is going to happen to you, even though it's
you're
you're more likely to be hit by lightning.
I the way they had it marketed was that every small town has got this cult of devil worshippers that just go around and we still have that today. I remember when we first got together and we were doing stuff at Sarah's house. I was doing research to see if there's any reason your house should be haunted or whatever. When we were doing all that, like the first thing that came up was all this crap about
baby sacrifice at the local hospital.
Oh my God! And what's funny is, and then we heard that again at Yoakum. He was like, yeah, they keep asking about the baby sacrifices down in the basement, and that's not even like a thing. It's just a thing that goes around or whatever.
But anyway, the whole McMartin thing, I think, was a really big case of mass hysteria and the moral panic thing we keep running into.
It's a perfect example of mass hysteria.
Because, I mean, people really believed it. So much so that they, would knock down the family, spit on them. Vandalize their home, burn down their daycare twice.
Why do you think it's so easy to fall into that trope?
Human nature.
Yeah, we groupthink. We're really bad.
Yeah, it's human nature, and you have the most vulnerable in society. And we want to protect the most vulnerable of society.
But it always seems like that there's one person behind that group mentality that starts it. Like, what's the motivation behind it?
In this case, the lady was batshit insane.
Yeah, the lady honestly thought that people were hurting her son. It just turns out she was just, nuts.
Crazy.
She looked cray. Sometimes I would think the motivation... money sometimes in some cases, that when they're not crazy, sometimes money, sometimes just being malicious.
I don't know. I know how spread it got, because it got all the way to where you've got the documentary exposing Satan's underground, the Geraldo Rivera thing or whatever. And I don't necessarily think he's a bad person. I think he does really good documentaries, but I think a lot of them are like misinformed things like in that, because like he did the thing with, was it Waverly Hills or whatever?
It was the
Pinhurst.
No,
the pre-Cropsey place.
Yes, and I cannot remember.
I forget. It was an institution for mentally handicapped.
Yeah, and he exposed that. Like he did a good. That was good.
That was good journalism.
Good journalism, and I think with his exposing Satan's underground, the devil worship thing, he was doing good journalism. The problem is so much misinformation was out there that I don't think the best of us could have distinguished at the time.
But one thing that was also happening in the 80s was the rise of cable and the cable news cycle. So whenever you have the cable,
you had dedicated news.
You have the cable news cycle, and you have to keep people in.
It's the rise.
You have to keep people's attention. Because people's attention, that's money. So
yeah, that's when news cycles started going to where they actually had to do sweeps with the rest of everybody else, and so you had the rise of things like CNN, Cable News Network,
Fox News.
Well,
Fox News actually came later, but yeah,
that's one of the comments in that movie I was watching, the one on the McMartin trial. It's one of the journalists goes, "Wow, that's awesome! This happened, especially during sweeps week." I was like, "Holy crap, you crazy bitch!"
Yeah. And I mean, that also comes back up with Columbine later on.
But I looked up a side project for the Satanic Panic thing, because it's something we've all done. D&D. Apparently, D&D is Satanist, and they are attributing...
I had a lot of friends that weren't allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons because it had spells and stuff in it, and it was satanic.
This article I found attributes 118 deaths to the playing of D&D. But one of the most famous cases, and I love this guy's name, James Dallas Egbert of Dayton, Ohio. He committed suicide on August 16th of 1980. He shot himself in the head. He was at Michigan University. He'd been playing D&D, a member of the Tolkien Society. He went to the tunnels under the campus to do it. He wrote a note saying, "I'll give Satan my mind and power." He was a gifted student, but prone to depression and other psychological issues. But this case and a few others brought about the rise of the propaganda films like Mazes and Monsters, which is an early Tom Hanks flick that I very much recommend. It is just great.
You should have won an Oscar for that. I've got that in my DVD collection somewhere.
It was to the point that when my brother actually saw me playing D&D at my mom's house, he freaked out. But of course, he grew up during prime Satanic Panic years.
I always thought it was cooler because it had that stigma on it.
Another super famous
I remember
one,
the first time I got like a set of polyhedral dice, right? I thought when I was very, very little, I think my cousin was playing D&D or whatever. I didn't know anything about it. But I remember the book, it was like a black book. Like it wasn't like the cover you're used to now. It was just like this black book. And he had these like weird looking dice that looked like crystals, and I was like, "Ooh, they're doing magic or whatever." And that was just kind of what I knew about it as a little kid.
I mean, they think that they are, but they're really not.
one of the moms of a student who killed himself, Patricia Pulling, tried to sue the high school. She actually came up with a group called BAD, Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons. She described it as a fantasy role-playing game which uses demonology, witchcraft, voodoo, murder, rape, blasphemy, suicide, assassination, insanity, sex perversion, homosexuality, prostitution, satanic-type rituals, gambling, barbarism, cannibalism, sadism, desecration, demon summoning, necromantics, divination, and other teachings.
Don't threaten me with a good evening.
And
I mean, more than anything, it teaches you math. That's what
D&D was great. It taught me social skills, how to act, how to organize, because I had to like put games together, math. I learned charts.
I still
graphs.
haven't. I still can't.
But
math.
an interesting guy had a hand in the demonization of D&D. A man by the name of Jack Chick. You know the chick tracks you hand out in the bowling alley when you go. So our church would give us these tracks, and you go to like the bowling alley, or you go.
And you go hand out the word of
chick
God.
tracks.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was about to say, what's a track? Because we didn't.
It's like when you're supposed to leave a tip for a waitress, and you leave that crappy little book
Where
instead.
it's like, yeah,
One of
okay.
them-
Here's your tip.
One
Talk
of
to
them
Jesus.
he published was called Dark Dungeons, and someone commented it's really interesting that in the drawing of the people playing D&D, they actually have a dungeon master screen, so someone knew what was up. And it just goes on to show how this girl's friend died, and she had to get away from D&D because it's Satanism, and they actually made a movie based on this in like 2014 that's meant to be a joke, but yeah, he was responsible for a lot of the everything is Satanism and obviously evil.
Is he the one that's also behind the yoga pants or the devil too?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't even think he's around anymore. I mean, I know that mode of thinking was so prevalent. I've got a friend that was not allowed to play Final Fantasy on Nintendo because it was like related to D&D or whatever, and it would make him stray from you.
I'm growing up. I'm pretty sure we each knew at least one person who couldn't read Harry Potter, right?
Or listen to certain music.
Or play Magic the Gathering.
Music was real big when I was a kid. It was Marilyn Manson and stuff like. And my parents were always cool because my dad liked Alice Cooper and Ozzy Osbourne growing up, so he was on the reality side of it. And I remember coming home and I'm like, "Hey, Dad, there's this cool band. It's Marilyn." Like I felt like I had to ask because it was such a big deal at school. And like he looked at me like I was stupid, but I was like, "Hey, Marilyn Manson, I want to listen." He's like, "Okay, go get it." I'm like,
Yeah, Marilyn Manson
I'm like, "You
was-
don't understand. Like all these kids at school are devil worshippers," and but he's like, "Yeah, it's just makeup, dude." Like I listened to Alice Cooper when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so it was always like this mystery to me, like why everybody else was so twisted about it. I never was
Marilyn
around.
Manson was the boogeyman of the late 90s.
Well, so I called my mom and I asked her because she lived through Satanic Panic, and she said metal was a big Metallica, AC/DC, all of these things were banned.
Black Sabbath.
And the church talked about it a lot. And that at some point, they actually threw out all their secular music because the people were so crazy over it.
But Motley Crue.
And then in the early 80s, Stranger Danger becomes a thing in the Reagan era. And then the rise of the, HIV, Tylenol murders.
Yeah.
And the whole, they're going to put horrible things in your candy started.
I think one of the things that's really interesting is when these people that are talking about devil worshippers doing these things, what they're really talking about is sadists.
Not Satanist, but sadist.
I'm being dead serious here. You're talking about somebody that does harm to somebody else that they don't know for absolutely no reason, like the Tylenol killer. That would be classified as somebody that's a sadist. It's like the one time in history where somebody actually did that thing, you know, the,
Yeah.
the razor blades and the apples or whatever. And now that's why you have that tamper-proof seal on every single bit of medicine you buy, because this one guy,
It was a woman.
yeah, this one, so I forgot. Yeah.
Wasn't it a woman?
I don't
Or was that
remember.
the Excedrin?
I don't know.
This happened twice
Yeah, one woman, like,
at the same company.
She was trying to cover up the murder of her husband, so she did that by tampering with some Excedrin at the store to make it look like it was like, oh, it was a bad
Well,
batch.
the Tylenol one
Yeah,
was
okay.
actually somebody at the factory, like, put in some,
Okay.
like, poison Tylenol.
Oh, see, I'm thinking about a totally
And
different murder
it
case.
freaked everybody out. But that's a sadist. Like, if there actually was somebody that was poisoning candy at Halloween, which it's never, ever, ever happened. It's just an urban legend.
Okay, it happened the one time, but it was the kid's own dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't a random thing. That was a murderer, not just somebody that's
Yeah.
like trying to harm random people for the pleasure of harming random
Yeah,
people.
he just wanted to harm his children.
There are almost zero instances of the devil worshippers that are sadists, where they're doing it to like random things.
Normally, it's
people.
like any like these Satanists that you fear are really just lonely people, just like you and I, who just want a place to belong and have found it in a place that's different than.
I think for the most part, Satanists don't call themselves Satanists anymore. I think they're all just atheists now.
They still refer to themselves as Satanists.
Yeah.
They're just very specific.
or as part of the Satanic Church.
And they'll call it, I'm a Levian Satanist. It's
Right.
Yeah.
They're specific.
Yeah. I was going to go back to, because I wanted to respond to Samantha said that her aunt wouldn't let Harry Potter in the house.
What's the big deal with Harry Potter?
It has magic in it.
It has magic.
But
in
it's
it.
marketed as just fiction.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Like I knew a lot. I knew a few people who were not allowed to read Harry Potter.
I will tell you the phrase my Sunday school teacher told me when she found out I was watching horror movies: garbage in, garbage out. If you watch things like that, it's going to become apparent in your actions, and you're going to be not a good person.
And that's people that subscribe to
Video games
catharsis. Yeah,
Video games make you kill people.
They don't see things like that as a catharsis. They see it as you emulate the things that go in.
But I would assert that Satanic Panic is still a thing going on.
Absolutely.
I mean, especially recently with the rise of the Hollywood pedophile, the whole politicians and the Pizzagate crap and the Grove where they go worship Satan.
I would say it's even prevalent in the Catholic Church, because when you think of a priest, a Catholic priest, the first thing you think of is a pedophile.
Yeah.
Sadly, and that's not a
well, they kind of did it. To
Yeah, so
themselves.
they're not doing a real good job of proving it's wrong.
right. Yeah, but that's not a dig on them as a whole. You know, if you have 1,000 priests and one of them diddles kids, that doesn't mean all, But that is what's out in the media, and that's what gets the coverage, and that's what caused a lot of the Satanic Panic. And the movies didn't help. They cashed in on the fear, because it was a good way to get people to watch horror movies, because it's what scared you. With Rosemary's Baby, Hell House, some really good movies came out of that. What is that? Last House on
Last House on the Left.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last House on the Left was amazing.
Yeah, you get all of that stuff coming out of that era, because I think what it really was this like dark reflection of the Cold War. We had this enemy that we didn't know anything about, and they could do anything at any time, and there was nothing we could really do about it. There was just this tension.
Yeah.
And that's what it is with that thought of. Do you agree with me on that, Casey? Because it's like this faceless enemy is scarier than the person you know.
Yeah, absolutely. But horror movies have always been a really good reflection on society. And, not just, what was going on in the Cold War, but how people were reacting to the Cold War, or, how people were just being in general.
That's what Jordan Peele's cashing in on right now.
Absolutely.
He is doing a really good job of bringing stuff to the forefront, up to the surface in his brand of horror, because it's things we don't want to think about, we don't want to talk about. There's a lot of racial tension in there. There's a lot of uneasiness about not knowing a lot about the people that we are ostracizing, and really it turns out they're just this like reflection of ourselves. And like, if what I've noticed in the themes in his stories are that really the person you think is like the normal person is really the enemy in there. You know, with Get Out, it was, you have this great like urban, not urban, suburban society just going on, and they're wholesome and they're great, but just under
Spoiler alert.
But just under the surface, there's something really wrong. And you know, they touched on a long time ago with like the Stepford Wives.
Oh yeah.
And, and that really is what it is. It's a modern rehash. I don't want to say rehash because it is very original, the things he's doing, which is I really appreciate with this film.
But he did draw some inspiration.
Yeah, but he drew some really good parallels and just held it right up to us. And then Us is an incredible movie, actually. Like,
I haven't seen it yet.
The end is a little wonky, but I really like what he did. I haven't spoiled anything.
I know, I'm just warning, just in case.
But Us it's really good because it makes, through the whole thing, it makes you feel uncomfortable about something you should be familiar with. And what makes you uncomfortable about it is the fact that you can kind of put yourself in that situation and you're like, oh crap, you know, I don't like this. And that's sort of the same thing that I see going on with and I'm just a little bit older than you guys. So I was kind of just old enough to be cognitive of this sort of thing going on during the 80s. I kind of remember stuff like that, like, oh, the stranger danger thing, don't go wandering around on your own,
Well,
don't take
stranger
candy.
danger it's still around.
Oh yeah.
This is still a thing people think happens.
Well, I know, and we've had that conversation tons of times. Like, you were 90% more likely to be molested by, you know, your mom or
family
your
member,
dad
yeah.
than the stranger down the street with giving out
Yeah,
free
you're
candy.
also more likely to be abducted by a family member than
Yeah,
straight
I mean, the old guy down the street giving out candy. He's giving out good candy. That dude's legit.
Yeah, it's your parents that are poisoning you.
Yeah, it's your parents that are poisoning
You hear that,
with
kids?
pixie
Distrust your
sticks.
parents. Burn the house.
Well,
run away.
And that's that's part of the problem of this is it shifts focus. You know, if any of those kids were molested, it was probably their family.
Yeah,
And this shifts focus somewhere else.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, it because of everything, it takes their credibility away.
Yeah, because I was sitting there and I was wondering how many of these kids were actually molested, and now they get nothing because someone pushed this fantastic story on them.
Yeah, and that whole idea actually kind of goes into the West Memphis 3 case. That's the one I remember.
Were they falsely accused? So
Yes,
I don't
they
know.
were falsely accused.
Okay,
And, Damien Eccles was sent to
and
death
see, even
row.
today, I think when you say the West Memphis 3, I think people remember it as like, oh, these 3 dudes, they did something really bad, and that's how I remembered it. And then I had like briefly glanced at like falsely accused. I was like, what? Oh, apparently I don't know that. So what happened with the West? What happened with the mess?
Tell us the story.
Okay, so back
Regale us with the tale.
I will. Okay, so in 1993, 3 little 8-year-old boys named Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers, they all went out to play in this area behind their neighborhood called Robin Hood Hills in West Memphis, Arkansas. They lived on the Arkansas side of Memphis.
Isn't that your old stopping ground?
No.
Mina would be.
Yeah, I'm
The
from
old
the
stomping
meth
ground.
town. They made a movie with Tom Cruise in it recently.
Yeah, American Made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Movie about
Oh, is that the
meth
one where he's a pilot?
Yeah.
Yeah, the boys on the tracks, that's a story from that town, but that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
So,
They got good meth there.
I guess.
So anyway, so Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers went out to play one afternoon after school, and they never made it back home. They disappeared. They were last seen in Robin Hood Hills, so of course that night that's where everyone went to look, but the mosquitoes were all so thick and heavy that they couldn't continue because it's the South and it's May.
Oh yeah.
So
And mosquitoes are about as big as,
As, you know, hounds.
Magic Johnson.
I love that the search had to be called over mosquitoes. You know you're in the South when
yeah.
See, up in the north, that sounds ridiculous. They're like,
No.
what? Mosquitoes? And like down here, we're like,
oh yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Like whenever you're eating them,
Oh.
because it's like
No, those mosquito hawks. Oh, my God.
my
Dude,
God,
those things
yeah.
are...
They don't even eat.
yeah, they just
But
fly until they die.
just fly in your hair. How do you like that?
I don't mind them. I like mosquito hawks.
Yeah, until you think they're spiders.
No, you're just a pussy brat.
Okay.
So they of course, so they called off the search. In the meantime, while they were searching, earlier in the evening, a man had walked into the Bojangles Chicken Restaurant up the road.
Really?
Yeah, the place is called Bojangles. It's still a chain. It still exists.
Yeah, I've eaten there. It's in North Carolina. It's not any good.
It is a southern chain.
But they have a very
they
have a very racist sign on the side.
Of course, it's a southern chain.
Hey, what do you think the mascot for the Bojangles chicken chain is?
I don't know.
It's what you think it is.
It's exactly what you think it is.
Is it a caricature?
It is.
My name is Mr. Bojangles.
Oh,
To
Lord.
put it,
How do they still get away with that?
It's
it's
North
the-
Carolina.
it's the South.
But South Carolina's the South. North Carolina's kind of...
No, they're still the South. Anyway, so a man walked into this Bojangles restaurant completely covered head to toe in blood.
Okay.
Damn, those mosquitoes were bad.
Right? Anyway, so he walked in. The manager called the police, to report this man. But by the time the police bothered to show up, the search for the three boys was already underway. And the blood that was all over the bathroom was completely cleaned up, and the man had gone free. He was gone.
Of course.
So this man could have been the person who did it, and they let it go.
What's the rest of the story?
Anyway, so I got distracted.
Yeah, that's why I don't know why we're having you tell these stories.
I know. Anyway, so they call the search back on the next day, and one of the boys' shoes they found on the bank of the creek. So
The creek.
The creek. Yeah, my bad. They decide to start going in. This water is like completely muddy, so they decide to start going in there. And this police officer was crawling on his hands and knees trying to feel for anything. And finally, he feels something and it pops up out of the water and it's one of the boys. And
That's a bad day.
that's a very bad day. And so whenever the boy pops up, he is kind of awkwardly hogtied, with his right foot tied to his right foot, or his right hand tied to his right foot, and his left hand tied to his left foot, kind of with his own shoelaces. Mm-hmm. And so they find all three boys that way. One of the boys, Christopher Byers, had the worst injuries. He had part of his cheek missing, and his genitals were also missing. And all of the boys had stab wounds in their chest and genitals as well.
Were they already dead?
Yes.
Okay.
They were drowned.
Okay, I just wanted to know they were already dead before their genitals were cut off. I don't know.
What they honestly think, they're not even sure that his genitals were cut off as much as maybe a turtle got to him before they found their bodies.
I guess he wasn't turtly enough for the Turtle Club.
Boo.
Boo.
Ew.
This is an 8-year-old murder victim.
God, have a little respect.
Have a little respect, you asshole.
Did
Okay,
I just
so
get
who-
called out?
Who gets blamed for this murder?
So
These murders.
for these murders, so immediately they started crying that it had a cult angle to it.
Yeah, of course.
Their
What evidence was that based off of? Any, or was this just...
It was a police officer saying that this had a cult based off of it.
So...
None of these stories are based on any evidence.
Yeah, none of
I
this
know
is
that,
based-
but I want to establish that in the story because that's the theme of our show. So I'm just imagining they find these three boys, and there's the senior detectives on the case, and they're like, "Damn, this is the worst thing I've seen," and he's like, "Yeah, devil worshippers."
Well, I can kind of understand it to the point where nobody wants to believe that anyone could or would do anything to these little boys unless they had the devil in them, unless they were completely just something.
You're
was
looking
wrong.
for an excuse.
You're looking for an excuse. Yes.
You can't fathom the idea that any part of humanity does
Yes.
these horrible things, and that there might. You don't want to put yourself on the same level as somebody that does malevolent acts. You don't. Back then, I think one of the reasons that mental health has such a taboo is because if you admit that mental health causes you to do these really horrible things ever, then you have to admit that on some level anybody could do these things. It's in you too, and if you're just if just the right thing is off, you're you're just one step away from, that snap, and now you're tying up little kids and
Yeah.
letting turtles eat their genitals.
Yeah. So there was 3 boys in particular that they had in mind. Yeah, you got booed. That was a bad joke. Anyway.
Continue.
So there were these 3 boys.
Here,
that,
I'll eat one of the Bean Boozled things since
stop
I'm in a
it! You're gonna keep distracting me.
Yeah, please let her. Dear God.
Please finish the story.
I said I was gonna eat one of the things.
I'm sorry.
Just finish the story.
So
Why did you go back 4 pages?
So they found those kids' bodies and they said, "Hey, it's a cult."
yeah, so they found they assumed it was already a cult angle, and so you have Jason Baldwin, Damien Eccles, and or was it Jason Miss Kelly? Anyway, so you have Baldwin, Eccles, and Miss Kelly. They were the 3 top suspects immediately. Now, Miss Kelly doesn't know Eccles or Baldwin at all, but Eccles and Baldwin were like best friends. They did everything.
How old are these kids?
Eccles was 18, and Baldwin and Miss Kelly were 17. They were minors. Eccles and Baldwin already had kind of a rap for vandalism and for shoplifting, just stupid kid stuff. They were extremely poor. They were known, for the love of Metallica, for rock music, for being culty, quote unquote. Eccles had severe mental illness. He ran off with his girlfriend at one point, and he had done some stints, a little bit of a stint in juvie, and he also did some stint in a mental hospital. So, of course, they were the first people that they wanted to pin this on as, being devil worshippers. And then it didn't help that you had people in town coming out and saying things against them, either for, because they thought they would get a little bit of money, or just because. Vicky Hutchison, in particular, is she's the reason why Miss Kelly got involved at all, and she's the reason why Miss Kelly was questioned and then imprisoned, and then all 3 of them were in prison soon after.
So, okay, so
She said that they took her to a despot or something like that. It was like or espot, like a Satan orgy thing.
how long was there how long did the investigation go on?
The investigation, I know, it had to have lasted at least a year, because it was 94 when they were convicted. They were convicted basically just on hearsay.
Yeah, so there's no physical evidence to even tie these people to the crimes, and
Eccles was sent to death row on hearsay.
Did they kill him?
No, he survived death row somehow.
that's not usually a good thing.
That's not usually a good thing, but he ended up getting out. They all ended up getting out eventually. They didn't get out till 2011.
Jesus.
Eccles.
That's more recent than what I thought.
Yeah, and my biggest problem is that when I interrogated Miss Kelly, first of all, he had the IQ of 72. He was a Forrest Gump.
Okay.
He was questioned without a parent. And all of the questions that he got were leading. They kept giving him information.
It's no different than the Brendan Dassey.
Yes, that is exactly what I think of. Every time I think about how they question Miss Kelly, that is exactly how I think about it.
Yeah, and Brendan Dassey's been completely shot down by the
he's
highest
never
authority.
getting out.
He's never getting out.
He's never getting out.
And that there's not even circumstantial evidence to show that Brendan Dassey had anything to do with anything.
And that's the exact same case we have going here. And eventually, in 2011, we had enough people, like enough celebrities that got involved. We had enough protesters that got involved, enough people to finally make their case to get them out in 2011.
And this is why I've always been scared of being arrested for something I didn't do. And people are like, well, the truth will prevail. No.
And these boys thought that would happen. They thought, well, there's no way I did it. So why would I,
get in trouble for
why would
this?
I get in trouble for this? And sure enough, that's not what happened. They went down.
Yeah.
That Eccles could have been executed for something he did not.
If I had any advice for anybody, is if you get arrested for anything, even if you're 100%
You take that
innocent,
plea deal.
no, you get a lawyer.
Well, I know. Of course you get a lawyer, but I'm saying if they're like, oh, we know you killed this person, and you're like, but I didn't, and they're like, oh, we'll give you a plea deal for 20 years, I'd take the effing plea deal. because
But then you let the
if
person
they
who
say
actually did it off scot-free.
it doesn't matter. You're going to get convicted anyway.
Yeah, and so what they ended, and the worst part about this, I think even worse than the fact that they spent, like, what is it? How many years is that? It's a lot of years.
Almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years for a crime they didn't commit. They had to do what's called an Alford plea.
right, which
Which
is where
is-
you plead.
where you
You're
plead-
pleading guilty, but you're not guilty.
Yeah, where you plead guilty, but you're still, like, oh, but I'm innocent, but, the state still finds you guilty, which means these boys will never get justice. The boys that were murdered will never, ever get tried. Like, even if the killer came out and said, hey, I did it, they would have to find some weird loophole in order to convict him.
Well, hell, in as backwards as we are, and I don't know this as fact, but the statute of limitations might be out.
Murder
on,
has no statute.
Murder has no statute.
anywhere.
I don't know.
It's the one thing that has no statute.
But nobody can be tried for that murder because somebody was already found guilty for it.
Yep.
So somebody could possibly come forward and be tried for the molestation of them or whatever, but the statute of limitations is run out on that.
Yep.
There's
These boys will never find justice.
Right.
And a good book to read is Life After Death by Damien Eccles, about his story, about, being part. It's like his own, take on it and his own experiences with
it reminds
being
me
on death row.
of that show we watched, Rectify, where the guy gets out of jail after he's been on death row for 25 years. Mm-hmm. It's just horrifying that these things happen.
Yeah. And it really, really changed.
There's a lot of
my
cases that
views
are, there's a lot of
on-
cases coming to light recently where people have just been in jail for 20, 30 years or been on death row for a long time. And they're getting out because new DNA evidence is basically exonerating them because old DNA evidence was crap. Like they would do like the hair follicle tests and stuff like that. And then it turns out, oh yeah, that's not really a thing that's accurate in the least bit. And, in like with the Alford plea thing with what's his face with the staircase, they thought he pushed his wife down the stairs or whatever.
He got an offered plea.
Yeah, after years and years and years of like retrials and blah 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 blah, he finally got out of jail, and he ended up doing an Alford plea just so he wouldn't go back to jail.
That's where I've heard that before. I was trying to remember.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name all of a sudden now. He's the author.
So, I really think the Satanic Panic has left a few things prevalent in our society. Stranger danger, school shootings.
Yes. Metal bad. Video games bad.
Media can drive you to kill.
Speaking
Yes.
of school shootings, today is the
Anniversary of Columbine.
Yeah, today's the
20 years.
Columbine anniversary.
And
That's
they had an incident this week.
Yeah, with the woman who was like obsessed with Columbine or whatever, and they were
A
afraid.
17-year-old girl, and I believe she had weapons.
That's insane.
Let me actually look that.
Yeah, that's horrible that happened. I can't believe anybody would freaking do that.
But like school shootings and everything like that brought a whole new angle.
Okay, so last week, there's festivities leading up to the anniversary. 17-year-old girl.
Festivities, like were they having a party?
Like they have like a memorial. Her last name was Pais. I don't know how to pronounce it, but she lived in Surfside, Florida. She was reported missing. She flew to Colorado. On the same day she got to Colorado, she bought a gun and ammo in Littleton, Colorado. And her family reported her because she'd been keeping this blog just about how much she loved this shooting and how depressed and stuff she was. She was mentally unstable.
Yeah.
She shot herself in the hills near.
Yeah, I knew that they found her dead. It blows my mind because I remember that was essentially when our life went to a whole new stage.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that it can change forever because our life had been changing little by little. It went to a whole new plane of,
So, basically, on April 20th, 1999, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris entered Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. They killed 13 people and wounded more than 20 before turning the guns on themselves. And I remember watching this in school. Mm-hmm. And, of course, immediately they started talking about how these kids were bullied and they were separate from their peers. They were mistreated. They wore black. They liked the rock and roll.
And they did. I remember a big thing with the video game community was that they had done all their training doing Counter-Strike and Doom and stuff like that, and
But
that's
they mostly just hung out in
they have the basement tapes. They're super famous. Is they recorded all these videos of themselves.
They really liked Nazi culture.
Well, it turns out Dylan Klebold was an anti-Semite, but Eric Harris was a Jew.
I know, isn't that weird?
Because he made some crappy racist comment to him at some point that they recorded on the basement tapes, but they recorded themselves training, but they were popular.
Yeah, no, they weren't bullied. They were the bullies.
Yeah.
That's one of the most harmful tropes that has come out of this. That and the persecution, the Christian persecution, the girl who said yes. That whole trope came from Columbine.
yeah.
Because every shooting there's always that one story about the girl who said yes, but there is no girl who said yes.
So the story is they asked this girl, "Do you believe in God?" She said yes, so they shot her. But that's not how the story goes.
No, she survived. She didn't get shot at all.
And the way I hear it, Dylan Klebold was a Christian.
Yep.
He was actually a proponent of this. And the thing is one of their moms goes on to do all these TED Talks. And they actually said in the basement tape, he puts the camera in his own face and he says, "Listen, Mom, Dad, I know people are going to hassle you after this. Just know this was going to happen. It's nothing you did. I was always going to do this. I'm doing this on my own. It's not your fault." I'm like, holy crap. This kid knew for years what he was going to do.
Yeah, he was totally aware of his actions.
This is a straight up sociopath.
He one thing that I've heard, I think it was on last podcast on the left, they talked about it, that if he did not do this, if this had sat in him for much longer,
he would have been a serial killer.
He would have been a serial killer. There's no telling how many girls he would have raped or murdered, or how many people just in general he just would have taken
an
out.
interesting fact you've brought up before is that the rise of the internet has led to the death of serial killers and the rise of mass killers.
Yes, absolutely. With surveillance, with constant communication, and with this new world of constantly being online.
It would probably help if people would stop live streaming when they murder people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do it over time anymore. People used to hide it and do it over time and things like that. Now, if you want a high kill count, you have to do it all in one go. But yeah, I remember that very prevalently that after after the shootings or whatever, there was this big movement of, it's the people that get bullied that eventually you be nice to everybody because eventually this could happen to you because
which is very victim blamey.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. It's like, oh well, I think it was a way for people to be like, okay, well, I think it made people feel a little bit it's a weird way to say it, feel a little bit better about those killings because then they could kind of reason it psychologically because like, well, those people kind of deserved
they felt empathy.
Well, they felt empathy for the killer, and they're like, well, the people that they shot kind of deserved it because they were all dicks. But it's also, actually the opposite way around.
And it made people scared of goth kids.
How old were you in 99?
What year was I born?
I don't know.
Hang on. 7. I was 7.
Do you remember the Columbine shooting?
No.
Because the one I really remember is the Wedgwood shooting.
Yes. That one... Did that happen not that long after?
It was the next... It was the next September. It was the same year. It was 99.
I've got friends that were at Wedgwood.
Yeah, because it was... that was my first year of middle school. Yeah,
it was my second year because I think 3 of us in the room were actually supposed to be there.
Yep.
Yeah. But I will say that even though I was in high school much... like 10 years later than you guys, that still was a huge thing there where I used to wear black all the time and I was one of the goth kids and I hung out with 3 other girls who were also always wearing black and were the goth kids. And even though it had been so long, there was still that they must be devil worshippers or maybe they're Satanists or maybe they're witches, or it was always just that thing of, well, maybe they're going to do something dangerous and hurt all of us one day. And it was never like that. We just liked wearing black.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
I mean, in my school, I'm pre-goth. Like, goth was called freak. We had skaters and we had freaks and we had preps, and if you wore black and like Marilyn Manson and had safety pins in your clothes.
Never liked Manson.
Oh man, dude, I liked me. It's weird.
I liked some Manson, but
I never heard of Marilyn Manson until Columbine, and then that's whenever I got into Marilyn Manson. I was just like, oh, this thing I'm not supposed to listen to, it's bad.
Or maybe Marilyn Manson got
There
into
is
you.
no way I would have been allowed to listen to Marilyn Manson because I wasn't allowed to listen to Korn or Green Day.
It was weird because my parents you said that I was allowed to listen to them, but before I did, I should know that they are devil worshippers.
So we got two listeners. I guess they were goth in high school or you know, on there. But one said he bullied mainly for being gay, and it added to the fear people had him shooting up. You know, and that all came out of that.
Pretty much no shooters.
And I know Allie won't care that I call her out by name, but had, you know, she said everybody was overtly nice to her for like 3 months because she wore all black or whatever. And I kind of remember, and like I really remember that because, you know, after the, you know, oh, they wear trench coats and they were the guy and they were bullied or whatever. Like everybody was suddenly nice to all the goth kids at my school.
Not at my
like,
school.
Yeah, I was still very heavily bullied.
It actually got worse after Columbine in high school.
People tried to like scare you out of the school.
And I think that's the form that Satanic Panic took in the 90s. Is just the fear of school shootings and
the fear is it the form it still takes.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's morphed even more. There's this finger on the pulse of still Satanic Panic, it's just taking a different form, but
it's evolved.
One of the things it's evolved into is the clown sightings thing. You notice that that's like that's all over the internet, you know, and it comes
that
back.
Actually was in the article. It started in the 80s, the fear of the weird killer clown.
Right, yeah, and that actually started with like Gacy or whatever, but it's got more. But you know, every year you see like, oh, the clowns are coming out. Watch out for the weird, creepy clowns. Or
I do watch out for the weird, creepy clowns.
The funny thing is, that's one of those things that's not happening.
It's not a thing. Yeah,
it's not. No one is seeing clowns anywhere. But it's these sort of fear things that are in the media, and I think the media is mostly to blame for it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like with the
absolutely.
cycles you're talking about, because I think politics get stale. People get tired of not in the Trump era. Everybody's eating it.
I mean, look at the Pizzagate thing. That wouldn't even be a thing if the media hadn't focused on it so strong. Even to call it stupid, you're still putting it on the screen.
Yeah, like I don't really like with, you know, the families of these murdered boys, with the families of, you know, the Columbine victims, with the families of I have no blame on them. I have blame on, you know, the media, who they have to have this story and they have to have it right now because this is juicy. We need this right now.
It's the rise of if it bleeds, it leads.
If it bleeds, it leads. With Columbine specifically, they had reporters and these people's faces. They had just been shot at not even 2 minutes prior. These kids who have no idea what's going on. They don't even know what their name is right now because they have so much adrenaline going through their body.
And they start going, oh, did these kids wear black? Yeah, they wore black.
Yeah, they were black. Or, you know...
was he a loner? Yeah, he was a loner.
Yeah, the ponytail kid. Like, there was one guy who kept focusing on one girl's ponytail of this one girl ahead of him. And so it came out that one of these guys, one of the shooters, had a ponytail. And suddenly it became, you know, just from like 2 shooters to like, now there's like 7 shooters.
Oh, yeah.
Because nobody knew what was going on.
Oh, and they were reporting all sorts of things. John had the interesting story up there, though. There was a goth kid in his school that was accused of the murder of a young girl, mostly strictly because he was goth. There was no evidence. He got off. Better murder is still unsolved, as far as he knows. The media killers.
I grew up in Saginaw. I know y'all aren't from my neck of the woods, but do y'all remember Opal Jennings?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Opal Jennings, that's like 2 blocks away from my house where I grew up. Like that happened while I was living there. So I grew up on Mustang, and there's this street called Opal that intersects with it. And there was this little girl. I think she was about 5 years old. She was about my sister's age, actually. They were both in the same grade.
She was about 6. Yeah.
Yeah, they were both going to the same elementary school, same class, stuff like that. Like she actually knew this girl a little bit, and anyway, when she was born, they liked the name Opal because they lived on that street and they lived there. There's a park on that corner now, the Opal Jennings Memorial Park. But she just came up missing, and nothing like that had happened in Saginaw, like at all.
Like the Amber Alert girl.
No, that's Amber Hagerman.
I know. I'm just saying, like that.
Yeah. Same exact thing. And
sorry, my bad.
It was never solved or whatever.
I knew her name was Amber, hence the Amber Alert.
Yeah, it was never solved. They never found her or whatever. But, I mean, there was this huge deal about, like, the goth kids in our neighborhood. And a lot of them possibly got blamed for, like, kidnapping her and murdering her and hiding her or whatever. And to this day, they still don't really know what happened to her, who took her or whatever. It's a rough case.
Oh my God,
But I remember that hit close to home because it was like around the corner from us. And suddenly there was this big change because we all used to walk to school. We all used to walk down Opal, and then it was like kids don't walk around in that neighborhood. It's not a bad neighborhood or anything. That one incident, you don't let your kids wander around anymore.
Anywhere.
Sort of thing. Yeah.
You don't let them wander around anywhere.
Well, to the point now you can get arrested for it.
I let my 8-year-old walk up my street. He went 6 houses down, literally 6 houses down. And the whole time what I was scared of was someone calling CPS on me. Even though he's perfectly capable of walking literally a quarter of a block away.
Yeah.
But what was the other one we were talking about in the garage? Was it the Slenderman
Yeah.
stabbing?
Yeah.
Yeah, they tried to blame both the video game because it was violent,
Creepypastas.
and then they were trying to blame the creepypastas, and then they said it was actually a satanic thing, and that the whole reason was for the devil, and that was just girls stabbing a girl.
Girls who were bad at stabbing.
Yeah.
They were
stabbing
very
someone.
bad at stabbing. Yeah.
What I think is really interesting about the kind of the psyche of the whole thing though is like if you say Satanic Panic to somebody, they immediately know what you're talking about. They're like, oh, you're talking about the era in the 80s to the early 90s, like it's over with, like it's done, like we don't think that way anymore. In the truth, in the truth of it is we do, like completely and totally, like it hasn't. You want to say like it's evolved into something else, but it really hasn't. It's really the same thing. We're just in denial about the fact that it's still going on.
It's the same panic we've been feeling since the 1600s.
You can feel it even whenever you just say, if you know somebody who's a Satanist and you tell someone they're a Satanist, everyone's mind immediately jumps to, holy crap, they worship the devil.
They
Even though
sacrifice
for
children.
decades we have known that's not what it is, there's still just that panic about it. As soon as they hear Satanist, they go, devil worshiper.
Well, I hate to say it, but our generation is the next like adult generation, and we know better. But with the exception of like people in this room, like a very enlightened few, we're not doing anything to fix it. It's going to be the next generation that has to.
Jonathan brought up a good point. If you live in the South, the Satanic Panic is never over.
Yeah, it's true.
The Bible,
Belt.
the Bible Belt. Everything that's not the Bible is the devil.
Yeah.
I remember I went to a church when I was young, the same one I got married in. And my dad was a music minister for most of my life, but he wasn't doing it then. We were just members of this church. And 2 Satanists came to our church. Self-reported Satanists. And the thing I noticed is they were covered in tattoos. So that immediately marks them as other to me in my white bread, bedroom town nightmare.
I was about to say, look at you now.
I know, I have tattoos. But I just remember thinking, oh, why are these evil people at our church? Because I didn't understand, and I don't think anyone at the church understood either. They were just normal people, but they almost had this air of evil about them and mystery, and I was super curious about. But it was interesting because, I kept imagining they would sit down on the pew and just everybody would scoot away,
or they would like burst into flames.
I remember that going to church growing up too. Now that you see, I remember some people with tattoos came in, and my grandma made some like kind of nasty cut, like they need to cut their hair and blah 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 blah.
If you want to hear something fun, I grew up in a very small town in Arkansas, as everyone knows, and we had our very first African American family move in about 2001, 2002. And when they started coming to our church, everybody accused them of being devil worshippers, but that was just to hide the fact that they were being racist. So, and then of course, later on, we started there was an old water treatment plant, whatever. It was abandoned, and sometimes you'd go in there and there'd be like pentagrams on the wall, and you'd find chicken feet and just weird stuff in there. And so people would immediately go, it was Satanists, and then people would go, it's that family. And they did it so bad that family actually moved out of our town because of all just the horrible racist, and also just being accused of Satanists and just all this stuff. They had gotten all of it pinned on them.
That's awful.
Yeah, and so, don't go to a small town in Arkansas if you're anything other than a straight white man. That is all I can say.
We saw it real big in Cleveland post 9/11. We had a Middle Eastern guy that worked in a gas station, and they actually trashed his place so much he got so many death threats that his family had to leave town.
Yeah.
It's just the next other. We're always
Yeah.
looking for the next other.
Yeah, exactly. It's a never-ending cycle. There's always going to be another other.
And I mean, we're repeating one now. Immigrants.
Yes. Specifically of Latino descent. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
you
I mean,
gotta-
nobody's talking about white immigrants. It's always the ones coming from South America.
It's the dark colored ones.
It's just another.
much.
You're not in my group, therefore you're bad.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so, I think that was part of what made this Satanic Panic just so big and broad, is because it's like, oh well, he doesn't pray like me, he doesn't look like me, he has
It's
tattoos.
so weird for a religion that preaches
Yeah.
tolerance.
Yeah, well,
But, we're not going to get into that. But
At the root of it, no matter what religion you are, people don't practice tolerance.
oh, God,
No.
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 They want to say that they do, but they have just those strongly
Everyone-
held firm prejudices that they'll never let go of.
yeah.
What else do y'all count in on Satanic Panic? I mean, do you count the recent stuff with politics and the...
I absolutely count the stuff with politics. I think particularly the rise of evangelicalism, that piggybacked on the
Is
Satanic
it really
Panic.
rising? I don't think it's getting any more prolific than it...
Well, I'm talking about in the 90s.
Oh, okay.
When, you had your Jerry Falwells, you had
Pat Robertson.
Pat Robertson. Ugh. They,
Back when we boycotted Disney.
yeah, they
Illuminati.
yeah. they owe their careers to the Satanic Panic. If it wasn't for the Satanic Panic, they didn't have anything to.
They would have found something.
Yeah,
I'm
they would
sure.
have found something.
I
but-
thought of one.
What?
There was a Christian singer named Carmen. And he did a big piece called The Witch's Invitation. And I used to watch this over and over as a kid. And this must have been early 90s, late 80s, about this kid that gets a letter from, like, Anton LaVey. And he's like, just come and let me explain Satanism to you. And so the kid's like, okay, if I can explain Jesus to you. So he goes and he ends up having to, like, pray because, demons. And I'm like, how many times did I watch that as a kid? And just see this
Brainwashing.
propaganda.
Yeah.
It's-
It does brainwash people too. It takes a long time to grow out of that mentality after it has just been hammered into your skull.
Yeah.
So I didn't know the difference between devil worship and Satanism until I was probably 18.
Oh, yeah.
Because it had just been put in my brain so far back in my subconscious.
Yeah,
that-
I honestly thought that Satanists worship the devil. I thought that was just, and I never really thought of anything bad about it. I just thought that's what it was.
I mean, I was still a fanatic until I was about 24.
Well, and going back to the
Veggie Tales.
going back to the thing y'all were talking about with the McMartin trial, that brought rise to a lot of other cases of child molestation in with the Frank and Elena the Foosters. They went through the exact same thing. Gerard Violet and Cher Amaralt, like all the it filtered down through all these different like daycares and schools and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, because one of the people that they interviewed actually said there's a nationwide
Conspiracy. There was a big air of conspiracy theory that went along with the Satan worship thing, that they were all this cabal and like they were all organized nationwide, and there's this network of people that were doing these dastardly things. It wasn't just, Joey down the street worships the devil and listens to the metal. They also thought they also thought that all these people were interconnected, and there was this giant like conspiracy underground conspiracy going on of people that were listening to Marilyn Manson and molesting your kids and all that. And there were so many people that were put behind bars without even a shred of circumstantial evidence, much less actual evidence. And it was also in the height where they were doing the memory regression stuff.
It's a repressed memory.
Yeah. And they started doing the repressed memory hypnosis sort of thing. And even to this day, there's still debate, and it's a dumb debate in my opinion too, because they're still debating on whether or not these are real memories or implanted memories, or, you know, because they can't even tell you if hypnosis is actually a thing.
And memories are untrustworthy.
Oh, absolutely,
to the farthest
Anyway,
extent.
yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with 2, 3, 4-year-olds.
Yeah.
You know, because, I mean, first of all, memories, you're just remembering the last time you remembered something. And a 4-year-old can't remember shit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Hey, I lost my iPad. Well, where did you see it last? I don't know. Okay, I don't trust you when you tell me. You
That memory thing, because I know that a story that me and my 2 brothers all were there for, when we retell that story, it is in 3 different ways. Even though we were all there, we all remember it differently. So memories are just untrustworthy.
Well, you know, I've always known that, but I didn't experience it until we were writing the bit about Kyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to write all this down, I want to make sure all the facts are correct. And me and Sarah sitting here watching all the videos in order and stuff. Like, some of the stuff is happening that we remember. Some of the stuff that we remember happening isn't happening. And it's all in
times.
It's all in a completely different order. And it turns out our handle on everything that had happened there was completely unreliable for a while, other than like the highlights.
Yeah.
You know.
yeah.
So
Which is
trying to
pretty
go
much,
back
I mean, that's pretty much across the board true
Yeah.
for everyone.
and trying to get back into repressed memories. Who knows if that's a repressed memory or if that is something that
It is
never
so-
happened. And
Yeah, it is so easy to basically implant memories. I mean, there's one case where this woman was falsely accused of murdering someone, but she honestly thought she had done it so much, like, to the point where she remembered doing it.
Well, and that's the problem with a lot of these kids is now they're going to remember this forever like it happened.
yeah, I remember back when they had a big case about this. I'm pretty sure it happened, and it might not have all.
Yeah.
Well, and they're going to grow up thinking they were molested because now that's in their memory. It's an awful thing to do to kids, and it just
yeah, because it introduces, because I think that in itself becomes like a whole new type of trauma,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
you know?
And see, it's good that we figured out that you can't interview kids that way.
Yeah.
You can't lead them to say these things and torture them into agreeing with you. That's not how any of this
Because
works.
just like anybody else, they're willing to tell you anything just to make you shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to go home.
Yeah, they just want to go home and watch TV or play with their toys or, no, they don't like taking naps. Children hates naps.
So one of the things I was reading, I was trying to look it up. One of the things that's really interesting is when you're looking at all the data and the stories and the memoirs that are written about, like the Satanic Panic era and all these, everything is written by the alleged victims. And it's all data from before it came out as a hoax. There's other than the one you mentioned, there's hardly any literature out there that's written by the defendants, the people that had to defend themselves from this sort of
Yeah, because most of them,
accusation.
they just want to be left alone. They've had so much thrown at them.
Yeah.
I imagine, especially like the poor McMartin family. Their lives were ruined. They
lost
never-
everything.
They lost their entire livelihood. They never got that credibility back.
It's brutal. I can't imagine. Just sometimes I think about stuff like, well, what if you go to jail for a crime you didn't commit? It would be awful knowing you didn't do that.
And especially like because Damien Eccles is basically surviving on his book because he can never get a job. He's a felon.
Yeah.
Miss Kelly and Baldwin are in the same boat.
Yeah, John says Satanic Panic to me is a modern day witch hunt. That is exactly what it is.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I said at the very beginning of the show is that it's just a more recent version of
Finding those that are not
the
conformist.
Crucible.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Oh, Lizzie Proctor's
I saw
dancing.
Goody Proctor dancing naked
in the woods with the
The
devil.
Yeah, and behind it, it's
Poor Goody Proctor.
yeah, getting a bad rap since 1801.
The other interesting thing I saw about the McMartin trial tying back into racism is they used a black doll for the guy, and they said negative things about it. And when they brought that up, anyone on the jury that was not white was like, holy crap, this is awful.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Anybody who is not conforming to society's belief of what is normal is the devil.
Yeah, basically.
Pretty much what
Especially in the
this amounts
South.
to. Yeah.
Yes.
And now we have it. It's we panic over immigrants, transgender people. They might be using our
The
bathrooms.
gays.
The gays.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that definitely carried over from Satanic Panic is, you were talking about the sort of look, right? The tattoos,
Tattoos,
and
black shirt.
But one of the things they were advertising was that it could be anybody. You don't know.
It's the whole
It could-
Jeffrey Dahmer could live next to you. They look like normal people thing.
Yeah, and
They do.
what's funny is really what they were trying to peddle was that Allie could be the deranged killer next door, and I should be afraid of everybody.
Don't use me as an excuse because I probably am.
But what people are afraid of is the people with the tattoos and the people that are like. Here's the thing: if you're doing like these dastardly sort of like devil worship murders or whatever, do you think you're gonna
stand out?
You think you're gonna wear a billboard
No,
on
I'm
your
getting me a
skin
polo shirt and some khakis and some
Yeah.
glasses and a sweater
Go
to
work
tie
at
across my
Target.
shoulders.
and a black
Yeah.
trench coat?
I'm gonna drive a blue or white car
Just
Allie.
a sedan, just enough to
I
have
do
your
drive a blue
kids
car,
in.
with
yes.
with good trunk space.
Yeah.
For the
I have-
bodies.
I have excellent trunk space.
Allie, you're a serial killer.
So I mean, look at the stats though. So the new Satanists are terrorists coming from over. But if you look at people that are committing acts of terrorism and spree shooting and doing all these horrible
White,
things,
White men.
male Christians.
it's old white people.
yeah.
The interesting thing, though, of the recent girl that was going to shoot up Columbine is she was a girl.
Yeah, that's like the
Yeah,
first time.
that's
That's
There has
that's way
been
out
one
of the
female-
statistics.
yeah. The I don't like Mondays girl.
Yeah, there
Forward
was,
thinking.
she shot up an elementary
Elementary
school.
school.
We're
Yeah.
progressive here.
But
Women can be murderers too.
But no, it's interesting because they're not usually that kind of murderer.
No, women usually
They're like the
are
nurses and
Well,
then
no,
the-
women play the long game.
Yeah, nurses and wives
nurses,
that just
moms.
slowly poison or the kids that they.
Yeah, it's very rare that women commit very violent crimes. Most of the time, with mass shooters and stuff like that, it is a white male.
Like always says, how can you trust our memories when most of us can't remember who played Kazam?
Kazam was never a movie, right?
Right? See, you don't even know. Can't remember.
Was Kazam a movie?
No.
I don't know.
What was interesting is we were at a convention in another city for the paranormal thing, and one of the guys said he had a Satanist come in, and she was arguing with them about the haunting in the location, and he could see in her eyes that she was possessed. I was just listening to that, and I'm going, shut your mouth, Sarah. Don't interject, Sarah.
Don't say
Keep your
anything.
trap
Don't
shut,
say
Sarah.
anything.
I had to turn and walk away because I was like, well, actually, Satanists are not.
Actually.
But I didn't. I walked away.
I remember with my-
See, I don't know if I would have been able to resist.
What case?
Oh, when my ex introduced me to her new boyfriend, she was like, "He's a Satanist," and then looked at me like she was expecting something, and I said, "Okay," and then like she was expecting some kind of horror or something, but I know the difference, so okay.
I know quite a few Satanists.
Yeah, that's cool, I guess.
But it's really prevalent. It's still prevalent in our media. Like I said, on all the ghost hunter shows, I've seen it on Ghost Adventures. I've seen it on Ghost Hunters. All that crap. They'll go in there and they're like, "Yeah, they still do rituals here sometimes. Do you think that this could bring some kind of dark energy to this area, and that's what brings the demons here?" And it's like, do I think drunk teenagers effing around with some chalk and some
candles
Latin they downloaded off of Google bring dark energy to this place?
No.
No.
And the interesting
No, I
thing is,
don't.
most of the time, there's no rituals going on until they say there's rituals going on, and then
then people
teenagers
try to
go there.
emulate it, yeah.
Yeah, they go there. They're like, I want to know what's going on, and then they
Yeah.
scare. It's basically just they go in there, they go and scare
It's
themselves.
like you were saying with the Ouija boards, it wasn't a thing until they said it was a thing, and now it's a thing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, and that fear has existed for a long time too. You had like the Midnight Society. You have the Aleister Crowley group, and they did go around.
I thought the Midnight Society was
Western
from
Tales
Are You
from the
Afraid of
Dark. Are you afraid of the dark? Yeah. Welcome to this
the
meeting.
Midnight Society.
Oh, I'm sorry, Hellfire Club, not Midnight
Okay.
Society.
Then
I'm thinking
they
of the
put the
Hellfire
dust
Club.
on the fire and made it go big, and then they told stories.
No.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
you
Someone
were-
mentioned being Wiccan in the messages. Is being Wiccan worse or being an atheist worse?
I think they're both equally.
I'd probably Wiccan in the because one, you're just denying anything, but the other one, you're practicing witchcraft.
I don't know, because
supposedly.
the one family member who I told I was atheist, they were like, "That's the devil in you. They're making you not believe in God."
I'm about to say, the way
So-
I heard it from anyone I've told is that at least with paganism, you still believe in something.
Yeah. And with atheism, you've just denied God, and so you're the devil.
You're reprobate.
yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, Jonathan, that you can't be out with your beliefs. It sucks.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We know their feels.
Yeah, probably don't come out. I've gone that route, and it doesn't go well.
I have to. They don't speak to me anymore.
People are like, "Oh, just come out. You'll feel better." No, I feel worse. Now everyone hates me.
Yep.
I don't hate you.
Of course,
And his family,
Wiccan's worse.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which would be worse with mine.
I guess it depends on your demographic.
Yeah.
So.
I think I'm the worst. I don't know. Sometimes I think I'm the worst thing I could possibly, which is a Democrat.
Oh
How
God,
dare
yeah.
you?
In my family, the worst thing you could possibly be is broke,
Oh,
poor.
God.
Coming out as a liberal was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't talk to my family anymore because of it.
It's
Me
just more of the
either.
us versus them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so prevalent in every facet of our society, and I don't think we'll
Yes.
ever escape it.
No, and
No.
especially now that you have so many different avenues to persecute. You don't just have the media, but you have social media. You have everything. You know.
Yeah, because now it's not just the media that gets to weigh in and control it.
Yeah, it's
now
just
every
Every
single
idiot.
person gets to weigh in.
Every idiot with thumbs in the internet.
And because of the Dunning-Kruger effect, they are justified. They think they are justified. They are like, yes,
I
my opinion is valid because I can say a thing and blah.
I love when have you seen the things where they're tweeting and they accidentally message like an astrophysicist and then they try to tell them that they're wrong? Like, you're an idiot. No, I'm a genius. Oh my God.
Oh man, poor Jonathan.
What's up?
Gay, Wiccan, agender, and liberal. I am the rainbow sheep of the family.
You need a hug.
Wow, you need a hug, dude. I'd hug you, but you're really far away. I think you're in North Carolina, right?
I think so.
I think he's in one of the Carolinas.
Too
Yeah,
far
narrow
for
him
us.
down so everybody can find him. Way to go.
We're gonna
He's a
go
really
find
awesome
you.
person. He's
Yeah,
a
but-
good person to
Yeah,
know.
you think he's an awesome, but the thing is, coming out with something like that in a place like that,
Yeah, he
Yeah.
can never, I'm sorry, Jonathan.
that's like to get you tied behind a car.
Yeah.
I'm
Let's not tell
sorry.
nobody.
I'm sorry.
It's a secret between us. It's okay.
And like the other 18,000 people that download our podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure if they're on our podcast, they are not going to persecute him.
But that's another horrifying thing is now atheist is the other.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a lot of people that hate you for being atheist. So.
It's very like when Caitlin mentioned to a friend that she might not believe in God, she got punched.
Yeah.
Punched.
Or that person who skipped the under God and the pledge and she got punched.
It's so weird because growing up, I always felt like religion was going to get further and further and further away from politics because I remember when I was first getting into high school, that was like the direction it felt like we were going. It felt like we were finally getting like, we were learning about separation of church and state, and I was like, oh yeah, that was the dark ages, blah blah blah. But now, as I'm getting older, it's coming back full circle. It is integrated. We are making policies based on
Religion.
one religion.
That came about certainly after 9/11.
Oh yeah, 9/11 brought the herd mentality back hardcore.
Yeah, had to be against Islam and something. Pick something to be
you
against.
had to be
and-
pro-America. You had to be pro-Christian.
Yeah.
That was it. If you were anti any of those things, you were a terrorist.
Yeah.
Or you were a terrorist sympathizer. It's...
And that might be kind of like what we were talking about with the Satanic Panic thing. Whenever you had so many people saying it's Satanist, and you're the one person saying maybe it isn't, you're going to have to either go against the mob or join the mob.
Well, no.
Or become one of their...
There's an interesting
victims.
cartoon
Yeah.
that was driven like a guy in a mob, and it's like, it was Islam. He's like, wait, I don't. And they all turn on him.
And
I'm
he's
like,
oh, wait, never mind. Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's essentially what I figure it
because-
is.
Yeah, because if you're the one person speaking up for Satanists,
Then you're a Satanist.
Then you're a Satanist.
Yeah, and you become
that's
just
always,
someone
that's
else.
that's always
Or
the mentality.
you were trying to undermine the nuclear family, or you wanted these children to suffer because, you wanted them to be around the gays.
I remember when I started posting about gay people being allowed to get married on my Facebook way back when that wasn't a thing, and a couple different family members messaged me and said, "Are you gay? Like, oh yeah, I've got to be gay to support. What?
Yeah, why do you have to be gay to support?
I
gay
remember that
people?
happening to me.
Yeah.
I used to have an equal rights sticker on the back of my car or whatever, and I had a bunch of people that were like, "Are you gay?" And I'm like, "No."
Yeah,
And
you
then,
don't
why
have-
do you have that there? I'm like,
You don't
'Cause-
have to be gay to support gays.
You don't have to be a Satanist to say Satanists aren't serial killers.
Yeah.
Or you don't have to be a woman to stand up for women. You don't have to be transgender to stand up for transgender.
or a man to understand the difference between fact and opinion.
Yeah.
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 Eat a bean.
What?
Eat a
No.
jelly bean,
Eat a
Brad.
jelly bean, Brad.
Eat a jelly bean,
That
Brad.
was a
Brad.
good
Brad.
thing I said.
No.
Because
eat
you
a
said
jelly
it
bean.
sarcastically.
You said it sarcastically. Eat a bean.
It might be a good jelly bean. You don't know. Eat the jelly bean.
The jelly
Brad-
beans will decide if it was good or bad.
Brad bought the Bean Boozled jelly beans, and we're having a trial by jelly bean right now. If it's a bad jelly bean, you're bad, and we'll have to burn you. He's a witch. Burn him.
Face.
Yeah, it was bad.
No, it was berry blue.
Oh, well, I guess you
Well,
get to
the
go
gods
free.
have decided your fate.
I've been watching too much Game of Thrones. Trial by combat.
Oh my god.
That's the first jelly bean I've ate out of this bag that wasn't the
Oh.
horrible.
Oh, we could go back even farther. Trial by crystal.
Oh, God.
Berry blue tastes like
So
it tastes like the Flintstone cereal. What's that called? Fruity Pebbles.
you grew okay. So in Mino, what was there besides new people moved in there? I mean, what were their ritualistic Satanist stories? I know in Cleburne, it's that they're slaughtering babies in the hospital for Satan.
The only
Obviously.
thing that we had there was pretty much, since it was such a small, close-knit town that everybody could walk around at night, anything bad that happened, it was because of Satan. So there was a guy who killed his parents at one point, shot them both, and that was because he was a Satanist, and it turned out that they were just abusive, and he was tired of it. And then there were, cats that would come up missing, and so people would blame Satanists for that, and then...
Probably just tasty cats.
There were a lot of cougars in that area, so I mean that's probably where they're going.
Cougars like
Cougars worship Satan.
Like kitty
like
cats.
like kitty cats. Not like I'm 40. This 20-year-old's attractive.
like mountain lions, cougars, kind of thing. So it was pretty much anything bad that happened at all was because of a Satanist. They blamed the tornado that came and wiped out half of the town on Satanists in the Masonic temple or whatever.
Oh, Masons are evil.
Yeah, they blamed it on the Satanists in the Masonic temple for the tornado.
That's freaking rich because one of the things you have to be to become a Mason is
Christian.
yeah.
Don't you have to mock blowjob someone?
They
That's
have
what I-
all sorts of crazy. I heard that Mormons had to walk around their temples 7 times backwards and slaughter a goat before they could go in. The stories you hear in the Bible Belt. Because I asked the hairdresser we went to go see.
Oh,
I straight up was like, "Do you have to walk around your temple 7 times backwards before you can go in?" She was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "This is what I heard. I don't know what to tell you. I heard Masons had to kill somebody to get in."
Bible Belt.
what?
In the
I know.
South.
No, I honestly thought that they had to lift their apron and you had.
No, they do
I-
a reenactment of the Hiram Habif.
I heard they had
thing.
Is that what you call it?
I heard
The
they had to
Cairo
mock kill
Pit?
someone. I heard they had to mock kill someone and have a funeral for them. But the other,
Yeah, but okay. So the Freemasonry, or not Masonry started because there's a story that Hiram Habif, one of the original Masons, had people that were
Got a
working
mock
for him,
blowjob?
and they killed him to steal money or something like that. And it's like the nativity scene at Christmas, where you have the play at church, and they're like,
Only it's murder?
"Oh my god,
Eat a jelly bean, Allie.
eat a jelly bean, Allie.
kill me!" I'm actually explaining something here.
Okay, finish explaining
mouth
it.
is-
No, it's like Christmas. You have the Christmas play
Yeah.
at church. And they have the fake baby. It's just like that. They do the murder.
I got toothpaste.
The other one about Cleburne is Old Foamy, of course.
Yeah.
That people are doing ritualistic animal killing, and I have seen dead animals out there, but I'm assuming that's because people think there's ritualistic. killing.
There was a murder at Old Foamy, and it's accredited to satanic worship. Is what it's accredited. They found in Old Foamy. They found severed body parts in Ziploc baggies, and they said it was part of ritualistic killing. There's no evidence that that's
Yeah.
what it was. It was just somebody getting rid of a body or whatever. But in the police report, that's what it's down as.
Satanism.
Satanic
Okay,
ritual.
what's Everman's crazy satanic story?
We didn't. We just had gangs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, places with high gang activity ain't got time to
but
worship
we
the
didn't.
devil.
But the thing is, we had gangs. We did not exactly. I don't think we had high gang activity. I don't know, but I was also just off in my own little world. But like,
Didn't you get mugged there?
That's besides the point.
That's not what we're talking about.
I got mugged when I lived on Allen. That's the kind of things that
that was
happen.
That was a one-off thing. That's not like our whole town gets a bad rap, but like everybody thought that Everman was just ripe with gangs, ripe with murder, ripe with all of these things, but it wasn't. It's kind of a sleepy town.
Meanwhile, Cleburne's the rape capital of Texas.
Exactly. More
Lovely.
people were getting raped in Whiteyville than in poor old
Whiteyville.
Everman.
We have like 20 times the national average of rape in Cleburne.
But
Jesus.
look at the ratio of things to do in Cleburne versus things to do in Everman. In Everman, you can walk down the road and find a McDonald's. In Cleburne, all there is
That wasn't
goats
always
and
there, though. That wasn't there.
Okay, well,
When I was
Cleburne's
growing-
still the... In Everman, you're close to Fort Worth.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
true. We were.
And Cleburne's just trash.
I mean, Everman's got BT Cabaret, so
Oh no!
yeah,
it's
which got
something else.
shot up.
Yeah, it got shut up.
It's
a
back.
few times. It's not BT anymore. It's something.
Doesn't
it's some
matter.
sports capital.
it's
always
always
BT.
going to be BT.
Okay, what was the Satanist one in Saginaw?
We didn't have any.
No?
No, the only thing that we had in Saginaw was like the two black families.
See why? It's
Then-
always a it's
That's-
another racial component.
John says in South Carolina, especially near Charleston, if something bad happens, it's blamed on voodoo or gangs. Yeah, in Louisiana, there was a lot of
Voodoo.
stuff blamed on voodoo
I
constantly.
can't see voodoo in North Carolina or in South Carolina.
I can see
Yeah.
it,
It's pretty much anywhere in the South is voodoo is pretty prevalent.
particularly like in port cities like New Orleans, and Charleston's another good port
Yeah,
city.
I guess
Anywhere
that
where
makes sense.
slavery was prolific.
Anywhere where there's chickens to be killed.
Yeah.
Or Bojangles.
Jesus Christ.
Well, dangle chicken. It's not even good chicken. That's what makes me really mad about it. Like if it was good racist chicken,
Good racist.
I might leave it alone. But it's not good racist chicken.
It's just
It's
racist.
Is
Chicken.
is there a
are you trying to summon something?
Stroke? She had a stroke, I think.
because
Are you trying to say is there any good chicken?
What is that?
that's racist?
Synesthesia or
Yeah, no, it's oh my god, I forgot the name for it.
I was trying to ask, is there such a thing as good racist chicken?
KFC.
Because I don't think.
Have you seen the Colonel? He's racist.
Oh god.
dude? Do you know what they do to season that chicken in Kentucky? They've seen things.
They've seen things. They've done things.
One of the 7 spices can only be found.
Okay, we all have to eat a bean because we're terrible.
I don't like jelly beans under normal circumstances.
Too bad you have to join the
Too
crew.
bad. Too bad. One of us.
I don't like jelly beans either.
I don't
but-
think we should anymore. Apparently, it broke Allie.
Yeah. Stroking out over there.
I think the last question I have is how do we stop doing, like, as a society, how do we fix this?
Read. Spread the word.
Vote.
We really do have to like educate ourselves.
Stop
and then,
perpetrating
kind
these
of
falsities.
Yeah, and try to intervene when someone is.
If you hear
perpetrating-
someone say it's Satanists, go, excuse me, actually, no.
Yeah, you're-
and
On it, this isn't going to be a popular thing I'm about to say, but really, I think our media needs more. It needs some kind of regulation. It needs
Well,
something to step in.
We need more journalists, less talking heads.
Right. I believe in free speech. We have a podcast,
In
right?
that amendment, we can't help the journal. I mean, that's an amendment. We can't do the thing.
Yeah, we can't do the thing.
I know, but
I
there-
hate. We need less of the 24-hour news cycle. But sorry.
But what I'm saying is, like, I really enjoy my free speech. I enjoy the fact that we can have a podcast. You know, we're not professional journalists or anything like that. We can have an opinion. We can voice it. People can listen, things like that. But there is an oversaturation of people just having access to say whatever they want and say it is fact without any recourse, rather than as opinion or opinion analysis.
yeah,
right?
there needs to be a way that they say this
It's-
is not factual or this is-
And maybe not, maybe illegal is a bad word, but there needs to be some kind of handle on the fact of we need to get a handle on people being able to say something is a fact when it's not a fact, because it's almost the same concept of people yelling fire in a movie theater. You that is illegal. You can't do that because you're inciting panic.
Incitement to violence or panic.
Right, and and it's gotten to the point that with social media and regular media in all the outlets that are out there, like if we wanted to as a group, we could incite to panic just by presenting things as facts that aren't facts, and that is not right. Now, I don't actually know the answer. That's why I said it's not going to be popular, because I don't know the answer, because I don't believe in censorship. I don't think people should be censored, but I do think that there should be some kind.
We need more personal responsibility. Is that a good thing?
When the Pulse shooting happened, a bunch of churches were talking about how they don't endorse this. Maybe they don't accept homosexuals, but they don't endorse murdering them. And I said, you might think you're not endorsing this, but y'all loaded the gun. Mm-hmm. Every hateful thing you've ever said, every time you kicked a gay kid out of your family, every time you told them that they were going to hell, or that they could just have whatever unions instead of getting married, every time you said, oh, but Leviticus says, you put a bullet in the gun. You did
it is
this.
That's something I didn't even realize about myself until a few years ago. But everything that you say, everything you put out there has a lasting effect. It can be the most innocuous thing, but you can say the most the littlest thing, and it can have this like lasting effect until the end of time, until it's too late, and you won't realize that you were the genesis of that idea until you see what the full aftermath of it is. Saying, well, I don't agree with you being gay, or I don't agree with you worshiping the devil, things like that, and you may not mean it in the spirit of being hateful, but it can snowball. The way it can be taken by somebody, or the way somebody else can spin those words, it can turn into venom. And when you're doing it with things that aren't facts, which is it, and I keep coming back to that because it's something that's very prevalent right now on the highest level. It's somebody can say something that's completely not factual, and it gets reported as news across every single freaking outlet, and people believe it. And there's another news cycle right behind it saying, no, this isn't a thing. Like, we're having to fact check the news, like,
instead of them checking it before they report it,
and not just like our local news and like stupid stories and stuff. Like, we're having to fact check national news, like things that come down from like our political leaders. Oh, X amount of people die, and we're spending this much on like that stuff that comes like straight from the podium should all be fact. There should be no margin of error in that. Alternative facts shouldn't be a thing.
Oh, but they are.
Oh, they absolutely are.
And that's not just the media, though. That comes straight from the podium. That's just pointing a camera at it and them just spewing this bile out. And we want to be really mad at people for believing the things that they hear. So if the president or the speaker says something like, hey, we have this problem and this is going on,
we readily want to believe the speaker.
We're supposed to. We elected these people in office. These are the people that are supposed to give us facts, and then we're supposed to make decisions based on those facts. But the thing is we're not getting those facts, and then our news outlets are having to fact check that, and then 50% of them aren't doing their job, and then so we have to fact check it like 3-4 different levels, and it's getting to the point where, it's like, well, what new? Somebody tells you something, and the immediate response is, well, what news outlet did you get that from? Where did you get that? Was it
what are your credentials?
Yeah.
What is your source? Like, our parents never had to do that, and their parents never had to do that. Well, what's your source in normal conversation? Not a normal conversation thing. That's something like your editor says before you submit something to get your Pulitzer. But here in like everyday conversation, you say, man, I hear the price on orange juice is going to go up because of some global warming thing. You're like, well, where did you hear that? Because that's, and I just made that up. But doesn't that sound like a thing you might just hear? And somebody might hear this and say, oh yeah, because of global warming, the price of orange juice is going to go up because we're producing less oranges, and nobody's going to check past that. Like, and so
we need more personal responsibility, or journalists need more professional responsibility. And
we do. There need, and I say regulation, not necessarily like a law, but there needs to be some kind of penalty for people that are blatantly misreporting things on a regular basis. I'm not saying like you can't make a mistake, or you can't have a bad source or something like that, but there is no responsibility in the media for, hey, I'm causing more school shootings because I misrepresented what happened in this last school shooting. you know, because it does end up to that degree. And it's like you said, with every misrepresentation, with every like little thing you said and everything that you put out there, you're loading another bullet in the gun. So the only people you can really blame for the things that are still going on out there are ourselves and our own gullibility and what we allow the media to shovel to us. Because ultimately we can shut down the media at any time as like a mass group. We can say, no, we're tired of this crap. You can't report the news that way and turn off the TV.
Unfortunately, there's still a large population that fully believe everything that comes out of that media, so they're never gonna.
Fox News.
And
They're never going to.
I got a big hard on basically against the religious outrage after that Pulse shooting.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the few times where I saw myself not as the victim, but I could see myself as the person doing the shooting. And my parents went, "We never taught you to act like that." I said, "No, but the other people in the church did." And a lot of it wasn't things they said, it was things they didn't say. And a lot of things they allowed me to believe. And when I was hateful, they nourished that. And that's when I was like, yeah, you're loading these guns.
They were leading by
And the
example.
fact that your parents approved of you being there, you know,
My
it's
parents probably didn't know what was going on. But
right, but it's approval by admission. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, I didn't tell you to go kill people, but I didn't really protest when that thing was going on, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of by proxy, and that's what I mean. Like, it's the most innocuous little thing. You don't realize it, but that has this like echo effect.
Oh, yeah.
It just ripples out there, and it's really scary. And that is what snowballed Satanic Panic is. You know, there were one or two things that were probably legit. Some of those kids got legitimately molested, right? But somebody needed a villain, and they needed somebody so villainous enough that it would get the attention, you know, and it went from there, and then it echoed, and it echoed, and it echoed, and it got worse, and it got worse.
You know, or like the West Memphis 3. Someone murdered those little boys.
Yeah.
In a brutal fashion, and they're never going to be found. They're never going to be convicted. You know, and it's heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
what did you do, Brad?
No,
Uh-huh.
I didn't do anything.
But yeah, I really tried to make that point to some people in my life who I would keep saying, you know, y'all, I know y'all didn't do this on purpose. I know this wasn't something y'all are good people, but this is what I gleaned from y'all as a child. This is what my child brain saw. And I'm guessing that's what a lot of children see right before they walk into a school and start shooting people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I rag on my family a lot, you know, because I don't get along with them anymore. You know, like I said, my grandma made some rough comments in church where I don't necessarily think these are like evil people, but I definitely disagree with like their political views and things like. And I caught a lot of flack because it's like, well, why? So you're just not going to talk to us because you're basically Democrat or Republican. I'm like, you are basically normalizing racism and like. Yeah, you may not be telling Mexicans directly that you've got to go back to the other side of the wall. You know, all these things I don't agree
But you're
with.
supporting the policy.
But you're supporting it, and that's wrong.
So I said
and I
someone-
have an adult brain now, but I thought those things as a kid. Like it's the conversation we were having where you voted Republican for so many years, and like that like little bit of knowledge is completely forgot that. No, when we were growing up, we followed in the footsteps of the things that we were taught, and we thought those were the right things. And for me, it's like the last 6 years, it's a complete flip where I changed my mind about how the world works and what I think and what I think is the appropriate action for right and wrong.
I said that to someone on Facebook the other day. They're like, oh, you're just not going to be friends with the Republicans? I was like, oh, I'm friends with lots of Republicans. But it's not that you're a Republican. It's that you're an immoral asshole.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with your political beliefs. It has to do with you being a jackass.
I'm friends with a few Republicans that are like, I don't like Trump, you know, I don't like the things that are going on in my own party right now. And their goal is to reform their own party. They're like, no, we need to get back to being true Republicans. I don't have a problem with Republicans or Democrats or any of those things, but once you get back to the true roots of what those things were supposed to represent, like I think we were talking about Republicans,
Small government.
Their main goal was small government. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that's actually kind of a noble sort of idea. It's hard to achieve, But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing to work towards that. But they've gotten so far away from that because now what Republicans represent is Christian fundamental.
Screwing the Democrats?
Screwing
And what Democrats represent is screwing the Republicans? I think fanatics are the problem. In politics, in religion, in hate, it's never the moderate. It's always the fanatic.
It's always the fanatics, yeah.
Well, and if you're a moderate, you don't have a voice. The only way anybody's going to listen is if you're far left or far right. And it's the pendulum is swung so freaking far. Oh, speaking of pendulums, I was going to bring that up. So the pendulum effect, right? So Satanic Panic drove it all the way one way. And then we got like to all the way to the 90s and it went like back. And then we got to school shootings and it went all the way back there, right? I feel like that Satanic Panic thing, it's like we're in the middle of a downswing and it's going to come to, a lull. We're really, we're more focused on like politics and stuff like that. But what do you think the next pendulum swing back to Satanic Panic is going to bring us? Because we've done ritual killings, and then we've in the molestations and the sadism and all that, and then we've gone to we can't do serial killings anymore, so now we do spree killings or mass shootings.
Mass killings.
It's going to be the apocalypse and war.
Yeah, I think it's going to end up being like a genocide sort of thing.
Well, because if you've noticed, the pendulum swings wider every time.
Right. Yeah. So I'm wondering what the next thing past mass shootings
Civil
is.
War.
The sweet
I'm thinking it's going
to
be some type of a war that goes on, and it's going to be mass hysteria. It's going to be bad, and it's going to be kind of like the beginnings of apocalyptic style, what the movies you see where everyone just kind of goes crazy and starts killing each other kind of thing. And
I think we're already in the middle of that because of the way we treat people in the Middle East in the way they view us. I think that is the next step to it is because you're actually battling over religious views there. It's like another crusade, a modern day crusades.
What's that line from Weeds when Andy has to go to Iraq and he's like, there was just some Middle Eastern kid and he loved Metallica and Friends, so you blew up his house and now he's a terrorist.
that was it.
Yeah, Jonathan says he thinks it'll be like the Purge.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, essentially that's what I think too. It's going to be
we might need a purge.
I'm in favor of a purge.
I'm going to go a purge.
Well, we're all
but the
poor.
new
And we
founding
don't
fathers
have.
weren't exactly good.
But I hope it's like the Rick and Morty episode where there's a purge planet and I've got a flying car. Let's watch them purge, Marty. I want to watch them purge.
So I was about to say, we're going to be on the bad end of that.
Yeah,
right?
because we don't have any protections.
See, I'm
we're
poor.
We're the outsiders. We're the nonconformists. So we're going to be first on the list.
We're poor.
Yeah.
Always says, anyone else want to build a bunker in BFE? Yeah, that's been my plan for when I win the lottery for a very long time.
I liked her thing earlier about how to deal with the Satanism. Her thing was just to move to a small town with a population under 20 and don't talk to anyone.
Then you're the Satanist.
Yeah.
Then you're the.
And then you got a population of 20, 19 people are Christian, and there's that weird girl that lives at the end.
That hermit.
To wrap it up, how does all these social situations and Satanic Panic, how does that tie back into what we do as far as like paranormal investigation and the things we look into? And
sensationalized it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And especially because, like, when we talk about what we do, people automatically assume that we're weird and that we do things that involve, like,
The devil.
the devil.
Yeah, we do get asked that a lot. It's like, you're not going to do any rituals, right? It's like, what?
But I think without Satanic Panic, I'm not sure if
There'd be that boom.
there would have been the boom of ghost hunter shows.
Yeah.
I think that really drove the horror industry, spiritualism.
I think it also drove up the amount of places to go investigate. Yeah, it increased the amount of haunts, things like that. It increased. I think it increased the way people view anybody that's got any kind of interest in the paranormal, because they're always worried about like what we're going to stir up, what rituals we're going to do, and things like that.
I'm like, what?
But if you'll note, most paranormal groups are very Christian.
Yeah.
Right, which is
Weird.
yeah, it seems counterintuitive.
I know, but in most groups I talk to talk about how much they pray and how they fight their spiritual warfare, and I'm like, that's really interesting, and they kind of look down on us for not being that way.
But really,
even though we have plenty of Christians in our group, I don't know what the deal is.
which I think is funny because standard Christianity is like, hey, don't go do that.
Oh
thing.
no, that's what confuses me, because it's like I don't think Christians are supposed to be talking to dead people.
Yeah.
I thought no-no.
Yeah,
It is. It's necromancy, and it's bad. Like 2 or 3 people in the Bible did it, and God was like, "Hey."
I like the one where he summons the ghost of his dad, and his dad's like, "Hey, you idiot! Don't summon ghosts. Stop that." Anyway, yeah, I think it really has driven the rise of the modern horror.
Well, I think it also circles back to what we do, because it's a really prevalent look at the psychology of the mass hysteria study too, because one of the things we look at specifically in what we're doing is how the brain is reacting to different situations, and we've only recently scratched the surface of starting to document, like Allie says she sees something, and so I go check it out, and then I think I see something, and then you maybe think you see something, and then one of us is just completely skeptical about it, and then since that person's in denial, all of a sudden everybody's in denial after a while, because nobody wants to be the one person, you know?
Have you seen that experiment where they have a waiting room full of people, and every time they ring the bell, one person stands up?
And they keep removing controls.
Yeah, and eventually it's all new people, and they're all standing up. Some of them weren't even, none of them were in there even when the control was in there, and they're still all, people don't want to be the odd one out. You don't want to be
everyone else
that.
is standing up. I guess we're standing up. And
Yeah. They completely Pavlov them into it.
Yeah.
That's such a cool study. I would like to do that
love
just
that
for
stuff.
fun.
And people tell their kids all the time, be the one that stands out. But I've always told my kids, it's probably smarter
Blend
to
in.
conform.
Yeah, just
It
blend
is,
in.
and that's, you know, we were talking about the other day is in a certain selection of situations, I'm fine standing out. Like I'll be the one person doing a thing. I have a very leadership mentality with a lot of things like that. And then there's certain situations where I know it's way easier to conform, and so I just will. And I can chameleon back and forth depending on what the situation calls for. But standing out is like one of the hardest things, being the voice in a crowd that says something different, because if you're the first voice, you're almost always going to be the one put on the stake. You're going to be the one that
Particularly if you try to be a voice of reason.
I don't like to stand out unless I get to argue with you, Red.
See, I don't like confrontation, so I don't like to stand out at all, because I'm afraid someone's going to say something to me, and then I'm going to just be all shaky in the corner, like, please don't talk to me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And so I can't do the confrontation.
But yeah. Anyway, Satanic Panic.
Satanic Panic
At
the
the
disco.
Yeah, Allie, I like her on her notes. Satanic Panic at the disco.
Yeah, that was my original title, was Satanic Panic at the disco.
Oh, y'all should have told me that. I could have done that title for the show.
We might be sued.
So to close out the show, I've decided that we're going to do a satanic ritual to try to summon a demon.
Okay.
Does it involve any more beans? Because that hurts.
Yeah, everybody has to take a bean and then talk in Latin.
I don't know Latin. I didn't study for this test.
She didn't know Latin either
gonna
until she ate
fail.
one of the beans.
I know 4 words in Latin.
Everybody take a bean.
I'm not taking it.
Why?
No, we didn't do anything bad.
I'm not doing
We
it.
didn't do anything
Yeah, you
bad.
are. This is how we're ending the show.
I don't like jelly beans.
No one likes these jelly beans.
No one likes any jelly beans.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right.
These are terrible.
I'm going to cry, though, because I don't know what this is.
Ugh.
All right. 1, 2, there you go.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Oh, this
Oh.